let me just record. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lainey Flynn, and I am the Assistant Director for Health Professions Advising. So I work with Cindy, who is also here today.
Hi, everyone.
And then our peer career mentors who help do peer advising are also here. So Geneva and Coco, and they are part of our awesome team as well. So the first thing we're going to do is I just wanted to kind of kick it off with introductions. So if we can kind of go around and the four alum can introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about where they're at now, maybe what year you graduated, what you majored in at Wellesley, just a few little tidbits about yourself just to get it started. I think that will be a great place to go. So anybody want to go first?
I guess I could go first.
Okay.
My name is Rhoda Taramenka. I am Wellesley class of 2019. I was a chemistry major when I was at Wellesley, and now I'm a first year student at Stanford Medical School.
Awesome. Welcome. Stephanie, do you want to go?
Sure. I was also Wellesley class of 2019, majored in neuroscience and did a stats minor. And I am a second year MD PhD at Mount Sinai in New York.
Awesome. Great. Great to see you. Amy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm class of 2022, and at Wellesley, I majored in chemistry and German studies. I am a first-year dental student at Harvard, but in the first year, we spend our time in the medical school. So
Nice. And then we have Hannah.
Hi there. It is possible that some of the other alums on this call were literally in elementary school when I graduated from Wellesley in 2011. I am a third year medical student now at the University of Michigan, and at Wellesley, I studied music and peace and justice studies, and then I took off. Saying that I took off 9 years makes it sound like I knew all along that this is what I was going to do, which is not true. But I lived 9 years of life and then started at Michigan in 2020.
Great. Yeah, and I think our students will be excited to hear about everyone's different kind of paths. So I have a couple more like kickoff questions, and then we'll open up the floor to students that want to ask questions as well. And students, feel free to use the chat as well as, raise hand function if you want to do it that way. But if you could just start off, and we kind of go in the same order this round, and tell us what you're enjoying the most about medical or dental school and what has been the biggest surprise.
I think for me, what I've been enjoying the most is like not having to worry about grades. That has been, oh my God, that like, it's still a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but knowing that you just need to pass, and and at Stanford, we have a true pass-fail system. So, you just need to pass and that's it. And I think that really helps to encourage collaboration. Like our class is so collaborative, obviously Wellesley was very collaborative as well, but it's a different kind of collaboration because, you at the end of the day, you all pass. So like that has been a change for me. Everyone here is so nice and just so, I don't know, we do a lot of things together. So it just makes life a lot easier. And I think for me, what surprised me coming here was when I think of a medical school, I think, oh, you just study all the time and that's all you do, or do research or something like that. But I've come to find that here, you even get the chance to do so many other different things. Like currently, I'm one of the managers for a free clinic at Stanford, and it's a lot of work, but I'm really enjoying it. And I also do a lot of other things on the side, like extracurricular activities. So I think that for me, that was a surprise. I didn't think I'll have the time to do that in medical school, but being able to explore other passions has been a really great surprise, and just having time to do things. I guess it's also my first year, so it would change as the years go by, but I'm just enjoying first year.
Great.
I have to echo that. All the classes are pass fail. Step 1 is pass fail now, so that makes a huge difference because it's just it. All the first year, the goal was pretty much like how little studying can I do and still pass? Because it's important to find the boundary, and just thinking in that mindset is totally different than um I guess anything I'd done before. So that is really great. Um, I think something that's been good for me personally is like medical school provides a lot of structure. It's like the what you need to do is very clear, what you need to study is very clear, and all the ways to do it is very clear. You just kind of have to like do it. And it's very well-defined goals. So that's nice. One thing I didn't expect is I am legitimately really surprised by how much fun I have like learning the content, because so especially second year, some of the diseases you learn about are just wild. Like I did not know that these things happen in the human body, and it's just like it's fascinating, and just every day is like full of a lot of surprises and a lot of very strange images. Um, I didn't expect that, but it makes it but easier to pay attention.
Yeah, also echoing what Rhoda and Stephanie said about the pass-fail curriculum, but something else that I've really enjoyed, especially here, that I think is really unique, is that at Harvard here in the first year, like the medical students, the dental students, and everyone like lives in a dorm right across from the school, which I think is really nice because for me, it feels like kind of like an extension of undergrad, and it promotes a really like unique sense of community because you go to class at the same time and you like are cooking together in the kitchen at night together. And it just like it makes it so much easier to be able to study together and work outside of class with one another. And because of the pass fail curriculum, I think the added community living really helps to strengthen those bonds. One thing that I think really surprised me was like, even though I'm a dental student, in the first year, since we spent our time in the medical school, it's been really interesting for me to see personally how they structure the curriculum here. Because even though like in the first, like even after the first month, like I knew nothing about like medicine or like any parts of the body really. But like every week we would spend one entire day in the hospital, like talking to patients. And it was like just really eye-opening to me to see how like even though I didn't know any medicine, how I was able to like really form connections and bonds with patients, because I feel like when I think about like medical school or dental school or any, you know, health profession in general, I really just like think about us like solving a patient's problem, and like that's kind of like the end of the interaction. But I think it's like so much more than that, and just through my interactions with them, knowing so little but feeling like I've been really able to leave an impact just by being there when they're in the hospital, and you know, wanting to have a student or just someone to be able to talk to them, I think is also really valuable. And it just gave me a nice, like refreshing perspective.
I love so many things about medical school. I'm really glad that you're asking me this now and not during my M1 year, because I think I would have had many fewer things to list. Michigan has a 1-year preclinical curriculum. So we do clerkships our second year and then take step 1 and step 2. So then you have M3 and M4 year to do electives and explore. So something that I've really enjoyed about medical school is that I loved my core clerkships. I loved getting to learn all the different disciplines. If I could be a medical student for the rest of my life and call that being a doctor, that's the dream. Like you just get to build relationships with teams, take care of people, and also like you're not going to kill anyone because you're a medical student. So like you really have, I think, a lot of freedom to just like learn and ask questions. Something that surprised me about medical school, medical school has been full of a lot of, I guess I'm surprised how awesome everyone is. Like I think that med school has a little bit of a reputation for just like bringing the gunners, and at least my experience of medical school is just very not gunner heavy. As Rhoda said, it's super collaborative. I am like in a community. You can see I'm a musician, and there's like community musicians here, and there's also lots of other old people. I'm like in a friend group of like a bunch of people who are married and have babies and who graduated in the 20 teens. And that's kind of amazing that like that exists alongside like my brilliant classmates who are the same ages as many of the other alums on this call.
Great. Thank you all so much. So one more question for me, and then I'll see what students want to ask. So you all took gap time, I think, if that's correct. Please correct me if it's not. And I know different amounts of gap time, but can you talk a little bit about your gap time, what you did in your gap time, if you want to share how long your gap time was, and then how it felt for you then going back into school? I think a lot of students are worried or think about what might that be like if they take some time off, and can they do that? Will they be successful going back after a certain amount of time? Hannah, I know you probably know about this. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I think I probably have the longest story because I took the most amount of time.
Okay. Yeah.
So there were 9 years between finishing at Wellesley and starting med school for me. I will say that, as you all know, like applying to med school takes a minute. So it's not like I had planned that whole time being like, yeah, I'm going to take 9 years off. Like I decided when I was 5 years out that I wanted to apply to medical school. But by the time that I took all the courses and I needed to work during that time and like to be able to take the MCAT and do everything, it took me a bunch of time to be able to do that. So during the big picture of this is that I don't think I would have gotten into medical school if I applied in 2011 when I graduated from Wellesley. And I think it is because of the experiences that I had that I got in. And that also like brought me to healthcare. Some of the things that I did, I started off working in kitchens and on farms. I then had a really sweet gig as a writer at Harvard Business School, where I was doing case writing about global health initiatives, as well as like creative industries. I like helped a faculty write a book about, like how people buy art, basically. I worked for a very hot second in consulting, and it was in that dark place that I realized that I wanted to go to medical school. That is not a knock against consulting, just what I was looking for. But it was at that point that I think I realized that medicine would bring together a lot of my interests. I had been a community organizer and I wanted to do work that was inherently justice and community focused. I wanted to use my brain. I wanted to use my hands. And medicine seemed like a pretty good intersection of those things. Once I decided I was applying to medical school, I got a job in a hospital, which I highly recommend to anybody considering going into healthcare. And I did research in health equity and palliative care at Dana-Farber and the Brigham. And in that role, I got to do a lot of research, but I also got to spend a lot of time with like different healthcare providers and figure out if medicine was actually the right fit for me. I would say throughout this time, I was also like a musician. I helped like run a swing dancing studio. I like was a very avid gardener. And I think that all of those things sort of turned me into the like budding clinician that I am now. And I'm happy to go into more detail. Anybody wants to, find me, I'll give you my contact information and we can chit chat.
Great. Thank you. Rhoda, what about, sorry, you're like, okay. Let's go with Stephanie. Can you share a little bit about your time?
Yeah. I took 2 years of gap year. I spent both of those years doing research at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. I think for me, my the main decision for doing the gap years were well, reason number one was I'd like really, really did not want to study for the MCAT and apply for med school while still taking classes at Wellesley. I just wanted that to be a separate thing. So that meant 2 years of gap year. I also was like thinking about applying to MD versus MD PhD, and I wasn't totally sure if it was the right choice or if I was going to be applying for the right reasons for such a long program. So I also took that time, like being in a hospital setting, to try to explore more about what life would be like if I did go the MD PhD route. Um, I think it was great because I had the time to just live on my own, figure out how to like be an adult and explore a bunch of random new hobbies on my own that I wouldn't have really had the chance to. So it was really good for personal development. All taught me how hard it actually is to like adult and do things on your own. And since I was doing research, and the just like the lab and PI environment I was in was very like relaxed and like you hands off. So I had to make a lot of decisions about my own schedule and what I wanted to do. And especially with that happening during the pandemic, it was just it was it was kind of eye-opening that like, wow, this is actually really difficult. And so surprisingly, it made the transition back to being a student a bit easier in the sense that I felt like, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I feel like as a student, there's so much structure. I really don't have to worry about, like, I don't have to worry that much about what my schedule is day to day. I don't have to worry too much about, like, I just have to do the things, but the things are all like, it's there's a Google Calendar that tells me exactly where I need to be at any given moment in time. Um, and I definitely thought it would be difficult to transition back to this student mindset, but it was easier than I expected, and kind of a welcome change. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of taking gap years, but do what's good for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to echo what Hannah and Stephanie just said as well. I was pre-med at Wellesley, but I did not want to take I don't want the stress of taking the MCAT and studying like and applying in school. So I knew I was going to take like at least 1 or 2 gap years. I ended up taking 3 gap years because I was working in a lab that Cindy knows all of this, but it was very that just required a lot from me. And I'm so glad, like, in the end, it really working in that lab and being able to do the work I was able to do helped me get a lot of publications and like other things that really made my application much stronger than it was if I had applied immediately after Wellesley. But I knew that I needed more time to like study for the MCAT and things like that. So I think just be honest with yourself. The worst thing you could do is like not be honest with yourself and take up this like process at a time when you're so busy, because it's so easy to burn out. So just be honest with yourself, be like, is this like something I can do now? Like every time people ask me, when do you think I should apply to medical school? I'm like, apply when you're ready. Because like everyone has said, it's a very long process and it's something that takes a lot out of you. So just make sure that you're at a time in your life when you feel like this is something I can do. Yeah, and it was actually a lot easier going back to school, because by the time I went back to school, I was so excited to learn. I tell you, I was just like going to class, like asking so many questions, because it had been a while since I was in the classroom. I was very worried about that, but it ended up being so much better than I thought. And you can actually, and this is not to knock on people who don't want to take gap years, it's totally fine if you feel ready right out of undergrad, but you can tell the difference between like people who took gap years and people who didn't, because I feel like when you've been an adult by yourself, you've dealt with bosses and working with different groups of people, you come into med school with a different kind of mindset. You're able to see the big picture, and like little things don't stress you out as much. I feel like, people who still go straight through, they still have that, like, I don't want to say pre-med mentality, but they still have a little bit of that. So like, not being able to see the big picture of things and being stressed out about like the little things, you're able to get over that, like when you've been an adult and been in the real world and gain like more experience. So I definitely recommend it if you think, that's something that's for you, but it's also fine if you go straight through. Like big ups to those of you who can, but for me, I definitely need that rest. I also got to do like a lot of things. I did some volunteering, I explored new hobbies. I just did things that really helped, made my application stronger than it would have been if I had applied right out of undergrad. So I definitely think like reflect, ask yourself, am I ready? Like the kind of schools I want to go to, is this an application that would be good for them? And if you identify certain areas of weaknesses, you can use the gap year to like improve upon it and work on it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And so Amy, I think you actually did go direct because Cindy told me that. So that's a totally different perspective. So do you want to kind of give that perspective to students that are thinking of going direct?
Yeah, definitely it is. I think it is a big decision to make in terms of whether or not you want to go direct. And for me personally, I made that decision based off of several factors, but for one, it was because there's like it goes both ways, but for me personally, I felt like I already like was in my routine and my rhythm, and I just didn't really want to lose that by taking a gap year, which that was just like my fear. I just feel like I wouldn't feel motivated enough to be able to, bring myself to, go back to school. So that was like one consideration. But in hindsight, I do also see like all of my peers who took gap years, like here, I just sometimes I wish maybe that I did take a gap year, because then I would have a little bit more money on my hands to be able to do some other things on the side. But then the second reason was just because I felt like, I think just like going into healthcare in general, the training is just really, really long. And I just felt like I kind of wanted to front load that a little bit and be able to kind of just like have my ducks in a row earlier than later. But I do think that it's like kind of like just wanted to like touch on something that Rhoda mentioned, was like the whole thing of like sometimes I feel like because I do hang out with a lot of people who are also people who just didn't take gap years, and I also do hang out with a bunch of people who took gap years, and I do see that difference in terms of just like people's like mindset, because people who have taken gap years, I feel like they're very intentional about finding a balance between school and life. Like I know a friend who just like, she treats medical school like it's a job. So she like goes to class when we get out of class at like 12:30. She like does work until like 5, and then she just like puts everything school related away and just like focuses on things that are important to her, whether it be like calling her family or like going out for food with friends. So I think that's like extremely admirable, and something that, because I didn't take a gap year, I've just been so used to like studying for like, when you get out of class until the next day for class. Like I think that's like an aspect that I really admire about people who take gap years and having that perspective. And then I just think also for me personally, I think my experience would just be so much different if I didn't come to a pass-fail school. But because it's a pass-fail school, I feel like I don't feel as much of that like I guess like everyone's like pre-med, pre-dental, pre-health energy. And I just think it's like a nice mix when you go into like medical school, for example, to be able to have like a mix of people who went straight through and people who took gap years, because like in my classes, I know like some people who like have their PhDs already, and it's like really cool to be able to, sit in a room with them and get to, like the professor's teaching about one topic that someone probably got a PhD in, and they have like just so much extra perspective to provide. So I think, I don't know, everyone's path is definitely very different. Some people, like if they want to, just like specialize in something that takes a longer path, some people do choose, my peers do choose to just like go straight through. And then others who, have a passion for like research, choose to like go the PhD route and then go into medical school. Or there's like a lot of in between in terms of people just wanting some work experience, or like Stephanie said, like being able to kind of figure out how to adult before that. So I do think, I'm at a lucky place where I do get to live in a dorm for another year, so I don't have to like worry about adulting just yet. But I know, I will definitely be a little bit less prepared than all the other alums on this call who have taken gap years and, know how to look for an apartment or like look for just like deal with like other things that are involved with life outside of school.
Thank you. Okay, I think now we will open it up to see if students have questions. So students, feel free to just kind of speak up, raise your hand, or put it in the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi everyone. I'm a senior and I guess I'm just trying to figure out what to do next if I don't get this fellowship. Did any of you take classes? Because I know Hannah, that you mentioned that you had taken classes. Did you do that to improve your GPA? Like, how did you manage that with work? And like, how did you fit that in a way that met the criteria of like what medical school accepts?
Totally. So I did take classes. I took them, most of my classes I took at night. I don't know where you're looking to live, but Harvard Extension is just a complete dream of a place to take pre-med classes because you're with a lot of other people who are deciding to do this sort of on their own path. It's also a lot cheaper than other places. If you can get a job at Harvard, you can take classes at the extension school for $40 a class, which made it just completely doable in a way that it was not for me before. So I took classes at night. Did I do it to improve my GPA? So I transferred to Wellesley, and when I first started college, I thought I was going to be an engineer. So I had done like math and physics and stuff. My grades were fine. They were bad enough that like the pre-med advisor many, many moons ago was like, don't apply to med school, you won't get in. But I definitely used the classes to help build my GPA, but I really did it because there were like a lot of classes that I needed to take. I think if you're doing it just to like strengthen your science GPA, I am not the right person to talk to. And Cindy knows the answers to everything. And I just highly recommend asking her what to do. But yes, take classes at night, do a job, and then go do class.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can add a little bit to this as well. Like I was very nervous as well when I was like, I applied. I was at some point I thought about taking classes to improve my GPA because I didn't have a bad GPA, but like, I was like, oh, if I want to get into the school, maybe I need like a 3.9, 4.0. I didn't like, not one person ever asked me about my GPA in all my interviews because I think at the time I was 3 years out. So most of the questions were about things I did after I graduated. So I think that's also one of the good things about like applying a little later because it's like, okay, you've had 3 years to live. What did you do in that time? I think for me, like a lot of my interview questions were about that and not precisely about my grades. One thing maybe that also helped was I ended up doing quite well in the MCAT. So I don't know if there is a balance. Some people say there is. I'm just talking about my experience, but I think it also, and you also get a letter from, at the time when I graduated, we still had grade deflation. So I also got a letter from Cindy that said we had grade deflation. So I think all those came together to help. So yeah, sometimes you don't need as high GPS as you think. Like I think the first you have a good like 3.5 and above, it should be fine.
I do think that admissions are moving towards more holistic review. I am happy to talk to anybody in detail about my grades and MCAT score. I had like good but not amazing grades, and I had a like below average MCAT score and still got into a great school. So I think that you can do lots of things to strengthen your application. One of the best pieces of advice I got was everybody's allowed 1 weak spot on their application. For me, that weak spot was my MCAT score. It doesn't mean all of the other ones have to be shining stars, but you are allowed to have an area that is like not your strength.
Thank you so much. Okay, so next question.
I had a question. Sorry, for people who took multiple gap years, I know like I think you need rec letters from professors you had at Wellesley. So how did you maintain that relationship if you like took a lot of gap years?
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but when I was at Wellesley, I loved my professors. And I was also local in Boston. So some of them, like, I'd go to lunch with them sometimes, like, I'll just hit them up. My chemistry professor, Christopher Rimanigam, I don't know if any of you know him, but that guy's like my dad. Like, we hang out. So it was very easy because we text and keep in touch. So it wasn't hard, like asking him for a recommendation letter. My other professors as well, like I try to send them like a happy Thanksgiving, and it came naturally. It wasn't like awkward because we had built those relationships like before. And that's one advice I would give about asking for a recommendation letter. Don't ask for a recommendation letter because you think this person is like maybe the head of this and it might look good on your application. Ask recommendation letter from people who know you and can write a very complete picture about you and can give like insights that some other person like who doesn't know you as much will not be able to give insights. So yeah, make sure it's people you're very comfortable with. Like one of the professors I asked to write my recommendation letter, I didn't even get an A in their class. But just because of the relationship we had formulated and built, I knew like this was someone who knew me and this was someone who'd like advocate for me and wanted the best for me. So like you should really keep that in mind when you're asking for recommendation letters.
Yeah, since I knew that I was gonna do gap years, I was very conscious about like I'm going to have to ask professors for recommendation letters after already graduating. So like a couple months before graduating, I had a list of like the professors who I thought I was probably going to ask for rec letters, and I kind of just asked them like not super formally, but I was like, by the way, I'm probably good, as you know, I'm probably going to apply to medical school. Would it be okay if 1 or 2 years down the line I asked you for a recommendation letter, so that they'd have it on their radar? I think like at least two of my recommenders were like definitely very natural. I was in Mark Tatel's lab for a really long time, so like it was like, of course I was gonna ask him, and of course he was gonna write me one. I worked with Casey Patanayak as well a lot. If anyone has taken stats or like knows Casey, like my favorite person on earth. So um super great. We had a great relationship. For a lot of the schools, I know I was looking at a lot of the schools, they asked for like a certain number of science and then a certain number of like non-science professors or like people who are not in science to recommend. And that was what I had to think a lot more about because I took a lot of non-science classes, but I never really like took more than one class with the same professor in a non-science area. So I just naturally didn't have as much of a natural like bond with um a lot of the non-science professors I had. So I think I ended up asking my philosophy professor from this one philosophy class that I really enjoyed. I think she knew that I was like neuroscience major or whatever. And I just felt like this professor, I mean, I really liked her, and I felt like since this class was very like essay based and um there were a lot of kind of our own thought. Like I felt like I put a lot of myself into the class, and I felt like she knew me in a way that other science professors didn't necessarily know me. So I had her on my mind for a while. I was a little nervous about asking because I was like, I'm just nervous about asking people for things, but it ended up going like perfectly fine. She was very happy to write a letter, even though I was only in her class, in like one of her classes, and really didn't have a lot of contact outside of that. Um, so yeah, like that worked out and it was fine. I think it's good to just like it's good to be thinking about it and keep it on your mind. Um, but you don't necessarily have to ask them today, like, will you write this letter for me? But just like have people be aware that like maybe you're thinking about applying to med school, so maybe you might need a letter in the future.
Awesome. Coco, did you have a question?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to add on to what Hannah was saying in terms of advice. I'm just wondering, what's the best piece of advice you've received about just anything in this process?
The only other advice I'll add to it's okay to not be perfect, which I think is like a very, very hard pill for Wellesley alums to swallow, is I am now somebody who like interviews candidates for Michigan, and we tell applicants to like do what they're passionate about. And it is so much more evident on your application that you do something that you care about, and it doesn't actually matter what that is, than if you just do things to be like, okay, one volunteer, one research, one shadowing, like that checklist is fine. It'll give you ideas, but like definitely chase your passions and bring that to your application. And then in terms of succeeding in medical school, like chat to me about that, but it's like nice if you remember that you're a person.
How much shadowing did all of you do?
I think for me, I didn't actually do as much shadowing because I had a lot of shadowing scheduled before the pandemic happened, because initially I thought I was going to take only 2 gap years. So, and then even at like when things slowed down, there were in a lot of hospitals were not allowing shadowing. So I didn't do as much shadowing as a lot of people think. Like people are like, oh, you have to have over 100 hours of shadowing, but like there are so many misconceptions about their application cycle. Just they want to know that you have an idea. The whole purpose of shadowing in the clinical interactions is to get a sense that you know what you're getting yourself into. So if you're able to show that on your application, for me, I had done I don't know if this program is still available, but when I was in my junior year, there was the Wellesley Bremen pre-med program. So I had done that. So that's where a lot of that's what I talked about a lot in terms of shadowing. And then I had shadowed my boss a few times also at MGH. So I wrote a little bit about that. But I think totally, in total, I didn't have as many shadowing hours as like you see on the Reddit and like all those discussion forums. So just so first, you're able to show that I know what I'm getting myself into. I've talked to mentors and like all these other things, and I'm sure this is what I want to do. That's the vibe they want. And if you're able to show that in your application, you don't need to have like over 100 hours of shadowing.
Yeah, I did formally. I shadowed twice, 2 gastroenterologists, coincidentally. And I had a little bit of clinical experience with just like being involved in some like clinical research, where basically I stood in a room while someone got a colonoscopy and held like a test tube and basically stood there for 2 hours. I think they really are looking more for like what you get from the experience, how much insight you get into like understanding what the what healthcare is like, but also I think it shows a little bit of maturity if you can see from your experience what some of the pitfalls are, or how you or your personality might fit in, whatever. Just like anything that's, I guess, a little bit more than like, oh, medicine's cool. I think they're just looking for like definitely like quality over quantity. In terms of the like advice that I've gotten, I don't, this isn't like the best piece of advice. It's just like one of the things that comes to mind right now. For, I don't know if anyone on this call happens to be in the same boat where I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do like research or medicine or whatever. One piece of advice that I got was like, when you shadow, like you can get a feel for what medicine is like pretty quickly and what the hospital feels like pretty quickly, but it's really difficult to get a feel for what like research feels like unless you do it for a long time, because it's just so much of a longer process and each different stage is so different. So I definitely was worried because at the time of my application, I didn't have as much clinical experience. So I was thinking with my gap year, do I want to do research, which is already pretty strong, was already pretty strong for me? Or do I want to say like find a job in a hospital to get more clinical experience? But at the end of the day, I think it was the right choice that I chose to go with research because of that piece of advice that someone gave me. So I don't know if that's like a controversial opinion, but yeah.
Great. And then Amy, did you do shadowing?
I did do shadowing. It was also like in the middle of the pandemic. So I only did like roughly like I think like on or off like 50 hours. But for me personally, I think for me, it was just like kind of what Stephanie mentioned. I think it really just matters like the lessons you took away from the shadowing, because every single time when like during an interview, the only thing they would really ask that was related to shadowing, potentially if they wanted to ask anything about it, is just like what was your biggest takeaway or what was the most memorable shadowing encounter that you experienced. And so just like having like one or two in the back of your mind and something that like you can go to during an interview or during one of the secondaries, I think is like more crucial than just like checking out the box of getting a certain number of hours shadowed in. And I also think that like I think just like don't put so much emphasis on the number of hours you shadow, because I think that also takes away from a lot of time that you have to devote to other aspects that are going to equally or be more helpful in your application. I personally didn't find like shadowing to be like the light bulb moment for me in terms of like what I wanted to do, but rather I wanted to explore all the different other aspects of healthcare to help me narrow it down to, for me in this case, dentistry. So like I also did like, and I guess one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got or that I would like to give to applicants is that like all of your experiences don't have to relate to medicine or to healthcare. So like for me, like personally, like the best experience that I had was volunteering with the Harvard Square homeless shelter and getting to work with a population that was like so vulnerable and got dealt like the most unfair deck of cards, and to be able to just like walk them through the process of navigating through their lives and being with them through some of their toughest moments was actually like something that's been the most impactful and has like drastically just like shaped how I want to approach a profession in healthcare. And I think because like regardless of which medical school you go to and like all the knowledge that you obtain, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all doing the same things, but it's really like all those experiences that you've had prior that really help inform, you know, how you want to treat your patients. And I think just like you don't always need to do research or you don't always need to volunteer at a hospital or shadow, but really chase like keep whatever passions that you have and like keep them with you, because those will get you through the hardest moments in school.
All right, thank you. And Geneva, do you have a question?
Sorry, okay, I remember. So I feel like a lot of Wellesley students, sorry, I'm forgetting my question. Okay, no, I remember. So I feel like activism, on-campus activism is really important for a lot of Wellesley students. And I wanted to ask if you feel like students on your campuses have a voice, and what the relationship between students and administration is like. And also if you know, what are some current topics that students are advocating for currently?
I'm happy to start speaking to this. So one of the things that I love about Michigan is that there are students on every committee, from admissions to curriculum to like hospital-wide strategy. And I sit on our honor council, which is the committee that deals with all issues of like academic promotion and professionalism. So we review any student that fails anything, and also like help navigate professionalism issues. So I feel like in that role, students definitely have a voice to advocate for each other and for, I think, like the student experience. In terms of like topical issues, again, I would be surprised if anybody on this call says that there's not a ton of activism happening on their campuses. I feel like being in healthcare, just especially healthcare now at this point in time in the American zeitgeist, is to be in healthcare is to be an activist. And I feel like there's a lot of space for that for us. I have friends who are doing a lot of organizing around trans health rights, both for the experiences of trans students at Michigan and what it's like to go through the hospital as clinical students, as well as like serving trans patients. We have also, we had a huge initiative on getting out the vote for patients, and we had student runners going all over the hospital delivering voter registration applications. So for patients who were hospitalized, making it so that they could vote. We also, I'm a part of a group that is running an incarceration and health series that there's a student in my class who like founded a doula project for the women's prison in Michigan. And I just feel like no matter where you go, I'm assuming, I'm sure that the other alums on this call are about to back this up, like there is space for you to fight for what matters.
If I'm not mistaken, oh, sorry, I just wanted to say, if I'm not mistaken, I think UMich also has a really strong like disability advocacy group.
Yeah, they're
'Cause
amazing.
we have a first year who, I'm part of the disability group here, and it's been like active but not like super active. And there's a first year who came from Michigan, who's like really ramping it up, and it's really great.
Yeah, both the university and the med school have a like I mean, we have like a disability and health elective, but we also Michigan has accepted a number of students with like visible disabilities who have also like really taken the lead on that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Hannah and Stephanie. There's like so much room for disability, and not just not disability, sorry, so much room for advocacy and for disability, for underserved communities, and like, which is something I actually care about. And here, not only am I able to advocate for, but I'm also able to do something about it through the student run free clinic. So there's like, and I'm not just speaking for Stanford, but for a lot of medical schools, like whatever you want to do, they'll back you up. You know, you just need to come up with the idea. I want to I want to switch a little bit from like wet lab research now to more global health and like direct impact related work. And they're like, yeah, just drop your proposal and let us know what you want to do and we'll fund you. So there's room for like different kinds of advocacies. There's so many advocacy groups here. If anything, the limiting factor is you in many ways. So yeah, there's definitely room for that here and like at most medical schools.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is one of my favorite things about like one of the best experiences I've had at Mount Sinai is we have a lot of advocacy groups, and just in particular, I'm on the leadership for HRSJ, which is Human Rights and Social Justice. So it's a group where in the fall we have like basically like an elective course, and then in the spring there's more like programming. It's run by second year med students. It's for first year med students, and it kind of covers just like basically every topic you could possibly imagine. But like things like that are just super duper popular. We have probably like 10 people on the leadership for this group, which in terms of a class of 120, that's like almost 10% of people. So just basically like anything that's activism or justice related. I guess another thing that it's like a bit of a surprise in that I didn't expect, and this is a good, like it's good that it ended up this way, but I didn't realize that there'd be so many people who like have my back, and like if I said something about like, oh, maybe like that thing they said in lecture was kind of problematic and we should bring it up, there'd be like 20 people who are like, yeah, I totally agree, like I'm so glad you caught that too. So it's just a lot of like-mindedness in that sense. And yeah, I think it just comes from like people who go into healthcare tend to like care a lot about everything and kind of want to do everything. So the limiting factor is just the fact that you can't do everything, but the opportunity is there to do all the things.
Great. Okay, next question.
Hi, thank you all for speaking on this panel. I was wondering if you could reflect on your experiences at Wellesley and just talk about the transition from going to a liberal arts school to probably more of a larger research-based institution. Also in terms of the student culture at Wellesley, we didn't have a football team, or at least one that competed, or, you know, a really strong sports culture in that way. Maybe Hannah, you can refer to that going to UMich. But yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
I still haven't been to a football game. I'm in my 30s now, and it is the first time in my life that I've gone to a school with a football team. I went to art school for high school, Wellesley for college, and now I'm at, you know, a Big Ten football school. I would really like to make it to a football game. I did go to a women's gymnastics meet last week with like a bunch of other med students, which was a blast. It's fun. I will say that I personally don't have that much time, I think, to like engage in as much school spirit as I could have. Definitely some of my classmates are more into it. And in terms of being at a liberal arts school, I am so grateful for my Wellesley education and for the values that Wellesley instilled in me and for the kind of student it taught me to be. And I think that all of those things like are helping me thrive in medical school. And I am somebody who is not especially pre-med at Wellesley and still got those values. I really appreciated being in such a just like wonderfully collaborative, like intellectual, fun learning environment at Wellesley. I like wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And I think that we will be better clinicians to have more people from liberal arts backgrounds because our patients are multifaceted and they have many parts of their identities. And I think Wellesley allows us to explore that both academically and like as we grow as people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was actually talking to one of my friends who also went to Pomona. He went to liberal arts school as well. And we're like, we kind of miss, you know, going to a small liberal arts school because I think the support you get at these places are unparalleled too. Like there's support here as well. But I feel like Wellesley was just so intimate with the support. You know, you got to like have that kind of closeness with your mentors. And like when I was applying to med school, Cindy was just so helpful that you don't really get anywhere else. Like in my experience, I haven't found it since leaving Wellesley. So for those of you who are still there and still have the, you know, are lucky enough to experience, like really make use of your professors, your friends, like, you know, just that close-knitness that you get from just being at Wellesley, really take advantage of it because you're going to miss it when you leave and you'd wish you were back there. So I have to hop off. I'm organizing a meeting for the free clinic training, but I just wanted to give one advice to people who haven't taken the MCAT yet before I hop off. I wish this was something someone had told me before I started practicing and started like, make sure you do as many practice exams as possible. Like I know we get anxious and you see the score, you know, you get like a score you don't want and you think that's the score that defines you. So you get scared and you don't want to keep taking practice exams because knowing the material will only take you so far. If you don't practice and get into the mindset of the AAMC and what they want you to think, like how they want you to answer the questions, you only get that through practice. So the more you practice, the better it is for you. Like if you don't have UWorld, please get UWorld. It's like it will help you review things and also learn how to answer the questions the way the AAMC wants you to think and answer questions. So like, please don't skimp on practices because I know it's heartbreaking when you're getting so many things wrong, but that's how you learn. You know, it's very active and it helps. So I wish someone had told me that when I started studying. So good luck. And I'll leave my email in the chat before I hop up. So please like feel free to reach out to me. I always love giving advice and talking to people. So it was really nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. And I know Amy has to leave pretty quickly too. We have lots of busy people here tonight. So I think it would be a good time to kind of, if we want to wrap up, and Amy, if you want to go first and just, if you can answer the question about the transition from Wellesley to Harvard and maybe final thoughts or advice for students. And then for all the alum, if you feel comfortable sharing your email, I think this would be a good time to kind of do that. But yeah, any final thoughts, Amy?
Yeah, I think one thing that Wellesley really taught me was, well, one, like finding a balance in terms of my life, because at Wellesley, you can be very intentional about the classes you choose. Like for me, it was like balancing humanities and sciences versus like here, it's just science, science, science all the time. And so for me, it's just like knowing that, like knowing my limits and just like being able to balance that with other aspects of my life. But one, I think like really helpful thing that Wellesley taught me was, you know, you're in a super small, intimate classroom where you have like maybe like 10 people in your class, and you like really get to know your professor, you get to talk to other students, and you get to bounce ideas off of one another. And then transitioning to here, because I had that experience of, you know, going to office hours and talking in class so much, and just being able to feel really comfortable and hearing my voice amplified in a classroom. I think, you know, here, you know, when I'm sitting in an auditorium of like 200 people, like I'm not like hesitant at all. Like I don't feel like I should like hold back, or I don't feel like you know, that I'm any less worth it than any other person that's sitting in the auditorium. And I think just like Wellesley, because you're through that education and that experience of, you know, hearing your voice in a classroom and being able to talk, like being able to have your thoughts relayed in such a manner, I think just has like drastically transformed like the student that I've been here. And I think like I'm no longer necessarily like shy because of, you know, because I'm sitting in an auditorium, or, you know, in our classrooms, we get like split up into like 40 people classrooms, and, you know, we have to still use the mic somehow when we're talking into a 40-person class. And I don't feel weird when I hear my voice through that. And I think another thing it also taught me was just, you know, even if you're in a 200-person classroom, like all the people that are here are teaching you, and they're really passionate about that. And I think it also taught me to be able to advocate for myself, and that when I'm not understanding something, kind of like treating those encounters with these clinicians who are teaching us, and just being able to ask them questions without feeling like, you know, like I just don't think, I think through my education at Wellesley, I'm no longer like in the back and in the shadows, but rather I'm really out there like advocating for my own education and shaping my own experience. And I think Wellesley gave me that bravery that I think everyone should, whether you're an alum or whether you're, you know, still at Wellesley, just like really take advantage of that and like practice like speaking up in class, because like before Wellesley, I kind of like always felt like, you know, I may have not necessarily been that type of person, but now it's like transformed because of that experience. And just like a parting word before I leave, I think there's just like so many different, you know, programs out there and different offerings that each school offers. And I think for like, when you're applying or when you're choosing a school, it's just really important to find a school that is the best fit for you. For me personally, I just know that like, because it's a very unique thing in that there's only like 3 dental schools in the country that offer like spending the first year in the medical school. I know that is a very different program in comparison to a lot of other dental schools. And for example, like that also impacts the medical students who come to these institutions, because they're also spending the first year with the dental students. So I think just like finding a program that really speaks to you and like is in line with your values and your visions in terms of what type of clinician or what type of research scientist, et cetera, whatever that may come in, whatever that looks like for you, just like make sure you choose a program that is in line with that, and making sure that, you know, throughout the process, you're not losing yourself and not being engulfed by just medicine, you know, just making sure, like everything that other alums have said on this call, just making sure you kind of like stick to things that make you happy, because, you know, even though we're all doing some like clinical medicine for a reason, I think, you know, you can't let that be your whole entire life.
Great advice. Thank you so much. And I know you have to run as well, so thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll leave my email, but yeah, feel free to reach out if anyone has questions.
Great. And Stephanie, do you want to share final thoughts?
Sure. I guess I'll try to share like one pro and one con about, or like one good thing and one more difficult thing about coming from a liberal arts background. Overall, I think that having gone to Wellesley is like the best choice ever. I think if you went to Wellesley, you like automatically have a, I think you have an advantage over your peers, but maybe that's just me. One thing that is great is that actually, like before I came to Wellesley, a Wellesley alum told me, if you graduate from Wellesley, you're gonna know how to write because you're gonna have to take classes where you have to write a lot. And it's helped me because like you have to write a lot in medicine, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly. There's a lot of like how to write an H&P and notes and all of that. And it's just I wouldn't really necessarily notice it, but then I sometimes see my peers just having more difficulty with the writing process or like not being as used to having a writing assignment. So I think that's great. I think Wellesley really teaches you how to write. One thing that was a little bit more of a difficult transition is I was so used to like going to every single class at Wellesley that it was the idea of like there are lectures, but I don't necessarily have to go to lecture in person or have even watched the lecture in order to learn the material was like very new to me and was kind of hard to. I think it's great when you start to experiment with all different types of learning and studying styles. I think it was a little difficult for me to experiment because I just felt so tied to going to class and sitting through lecture every day. But ultimately, I realized that it was a better use of my time if I spent half the time I would watching lectures, since I can watch it from my computer on 2 times speed, and then have more time to do other things. And it took me like a year and a half to figure that out. Those are my two things. And I also put my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me about anything, like anything at all. And I guess one last plug for Mount Sinai. If anyone here is like in the earlier years, if you really don't want to take the MCAT, Mount Sinai has a flex med program where you basically can apply as a sophomore and be accepted early, and you pretty much just have to like maintain a GPA, I think, and you don't have to take the MCAT, and you're just kind of guaranteed to get into the medical school in your sophomore year of college. I had no idea that that existed. So plug.
They still
for
have
Mount
the Med
Sinai.
Humanities program too, right?
What program?
The Medicine and Humanities program, where you apply in your sophomore year, you can get like a degree in something humanities, and I think then you go to Sinai over the summer to take pre-med classes. Maybe that doesn't exist anymore. That existed
I
when
don't
I
know
was a
about
student at
it.
Wellesley.
I don't know
Sorry,
about
that
it.
is my
The Med Humanities to the Flex Med.
got it.
Okay. So yeah, that's what that is.
Great, thank you. And Hannah, do you want to add anything, or I know you partially answered the question.
Sure. I will say that the thing that I value the most about having, sorry, you're hearing my dog cry in the background. But I think medicine, as many of you who have already gone through or are going through this process, it's an incredibly difficult train to get on. But I think it's an even harder train to get off. So I just encourage people considering this road to like really think about, there's lots of ways to help people. There's lots of ways to be in healthcare. I am glad that this is the road that I ended up on, but I also see colleagues end up in this space and not necessarily. I think, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that sometimes I think we get so focused on getting into medical school that we forget what it means that you're going to be a doctor after. So I would just like spend some time reflecting on that and what that's going to look like for you, because we have a like crisis among healthcare providers in this country, and I hope that you will join us in helping to save it and fix it and make it so it's better for everyone. But it's okay if you don't want to be a doctor, and if you do want to be a doctor or a dentist or anywhere in healthcare, we are so excited to have you join us.
Thank you so much. Well, I feel like we could keep this conversation going so long, but I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time. We know you're busy and it means a lot to us that you're here with us right now. So, thank you, students. If you haven't jotted down the emails yet in the chat, the alum were nice enough to put those in there. So please do that. And yeah, thank you all for coming. Cindy, any final words?
No, just thanks so much for being here. It was great to hear from you, and it's nice to see that you're doing so well.
Thank you.